Between 1347 and 1351, a disease crossed Europe and killed somewhere between a third and a half of everyone living on the continent. It is the worst thing that has ever happened to Europe. It is also strangely one of the reasons the modern world exists, because killing half of a population does something very specific to the half that survives. But half was not the ceiling. In some towns the death rate reached 70%. In a few it went higher still. So here's the question this video is built around. What if it had not stopped there? What if the Black Death had killed 90% of Europe? 5 people in every 6. Not a different disease, not a different century, the same plague, the same year, simply more thorough. The answer is not more of the same. Past a certain point, a society does not shrink, it stops. The plague reached Europe in October 1347, when 12 galleys from the Black Sea docked at Messina in Sicily. Most of the crews were already dead or dying. From there it moved along the trade routes at roughly 2 to 4 kilometers a day. Marseille by November, Paris by the summer of 1348, London by that autumn, Norway, Sweden and Russia by 1351. The mortality varied enormously from place to place. Some villages lost a fifth of their people. Others were wiped out completely and never resettled. Across Europe as a whole, the best modern estimates put the death toll somewhere between 30 and 60% of the population, perhaps 25 to 50 million people in about 4 years. For comparison, the First World War killed roughly 1 European in 25. The Black Death killed 1 in 2. Here is the part that matters for our question. What happened afterwards was not simply grief and rebuilding. Before the plague, Europe had too many people and not enough land. Wages were low because labor was cheap and workers were irreplaceable. Then half the workers died. Suddenly, a surviving laborer could walk to the next estate and be hired at a double the rate. Landlords who refused found their fields unharvested. Real wages in England roughly doubled over the following decades. Governments tried to freeze this in place. England passed the Statute of Labourers in 1351, making it illegal to pay or accept more than pre-plague wages. It did not work, and the resentment it created helped drive the Peasants' Revolt of 1381. Serfdom, already weakening in Western Europe, did not survive the century. Land became available, diets improved, more meat, more ale. Survivors inherited from multiple relatives at once, and a class of people appeared who had property and no aristocratic title. None of this was worth the cost, but it happened, and the modern world grew out of it. So if 50% produced that, what would 90 produce? The instinct is to imagine the same effects, only stronger. Even higher wages, even more freedom. That instinct is wrong, and the reason is worth understanding. A society is not a pile of individuals. It is a set of systems that each need a minimum number of people to function at all. A mill needs a miller. A cathedral under construction needs masons who trained for a decade. A trade route needs merchants at both ends, and men to guard the road between them. A monastery library needs monks who can read Latin. A city needs farmers within a day's travel willing to bring food in. At 50% losses, all of those systems are damaged, and all of them survive. At 90%, most of them simply have nobody left in them, and a system with nobody in it does not run at reduced capacity. It stops, and then it is forgotten. So what would the first 10 years look like? The cities would go first. A medieval city of 40,000 people needed a constant flow of grain from the countryside. Losing 90% of the farmers ends that flow. and losing 90% of the citizens ends the market that paid for it. London, Paris, Florence, and Venice would not shrink. They would be abandoned, and the survivors would walk out into the countryside to grow their own food. Specialized knowledge would vanish within a single generation. Cathedral building, deep mining, shipbuilding, glassmaking, surgery, law, all of these were carried by small numbers of trained people and passed on by apprenticeship. Kill 9 in 10 and you do not get slower cathedrals. You get a continent that no longer knows how to build one. Written knowledge would be at risk too. Books existed in a single handwritten copies in monastery libraries. The monks lived communally, which made monasteries lethal places in an epidemic. Many were badly hit even in the real Black Death. At 90%, most libraries in Europe would be sitting in an empty buildings, unread, rotting, and the survivors would be scattered. 90% losses across the continent do not leave a small nation. They leave isolated pockets of people who cannot reach each other, because the roads are unsafe and there is no reason to travel. Every one of those pockets would be on its own. That is not a smaller Europe. That is a Europe returning to something close to prehistory, with ruins in it. Now step back and look at the rest of the planet, because this is where an alternate history stops being about ruins and starts being about power. The plague hit Europe, the Middle East and North Africa. It did not, so far as the evidence shows, reach sub-Saharan Africa, the Americas, or most of Southeast Asia in the same way. So in this version, Europe removes itself from history for centuries and everyone else carries on. Ming China would be the largest and most technologically advanced state on Earth, with no European rival emerging at all. The Ottoman Empire would expand into a continent with nobody left to resist it. West African states like Mali would keep their gold trade without European interference. Their wealth would flow east and south instead of north, and the civilizations of the Americas would remain unvisited and unexposed to the diseases that eventually killed the overwhelming majority of them. There would be no Renaissance in the form we know, because it depended on wealthy Italian cities that would no longer exist. No European printing revolution on the same timetable. No age of exploration launched from Portugal and Spain. The Atlantic slave trade in the form it actually took would not begin. The most likely outcome is not a European Dark Age followed by recovery. It is a world where the center of gravity is permanently somewhere else, and where the history we were taught as the main story never happens at all. All of this is estimation, not prophecy. Historians argue about the real death rate, let alone an imagined one, and every step in a chain like this multiplies the uncertainty. But the underlying point does not depend on the details. The Black Death did not build the modern world because it was a catastrophe. It built it because it was a survivable catastrophe, one that left just enough people to inherit everything the dead had known. 90% takes that away. The knowledge dies with the people who carried it, and there is nobody left to be enriched by the emptiness, which leaves a question worth sitting with. How much of what we call progress is really just the story of what happened to survive? Not every mystery needs a plague to be unexplainable. 9 experienced hikers once cut their way out of their own tent and walked barefoot into 40 below. That video is on screen now. Welcome to Hollow Ages.